Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5s. Let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, number 2 would be the Super Mario Bros. Movie, number 3 would be Love Again, number 4 would be Evil Dead Rise, and number 5 would be Are You There, God? It's me, Margaret, and I got 2 out of 5 of my predictions right for this weekend. I was a little bit too bold with my prediction for Love Again, assuming like, well, everything else was making lower, so of course this rom-com that not everyone knows about will make it up really high up, even with these low numbers. Either way, though, I am still very happy with getting at least 2 right. I'm sure the people who actually got all 5 of their predictions right, here's your shout out, are also very happy that they that they guessed correctly. So without further ado, let's just go right on into it. Number 1 was, of course, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Like I've been saying for a lot of, big budgeted, especially superhero comic book movies lately, is that it's going to be way more interesting when we get to week 2. You know what I mean? Because right now it has an opening of $114 million domestically. Now, compared to the first and second movie's opening, it had an opening $20 million higher than Volume 1, but it's $32 million below Volume 2's opening. It has been several years since the Guardians have had their own movie. That's sure, you can take that into effect, definitely several years longer than they ever planned, not just because COVID, but because of, maybe an unnecessary firing that never should have happened in the first place. So I think maybe that was always kind of a thing, to always take into consideration, like maybe the third time, this time around, after this much time has passed since 2017, which was when 2 came out, maybe, there will be a little bit less of a return for the opening weekend, that is. And as far as how much it needs until it outgrosses both movies, it needs 219 to outgross the first one, 275 million until it outgrosses Volume 2. So it's opening up with a little bit of a ways to go. It's not the immediate slam dunk that I'm sure a lot of people, if they don't see that it's an immediate slam dunk, they'll all automatically go into like panic mode of like, oh, there you go, superhero fatigue officially set in, this is gonna be bad. And I think that's only true if this movie drops like over 60% next weekend, you know what I mean? Like if it has a strong hold next weekend, then I think we'll be in okay business. It's gotten really great audience reviews, an A on Cinema Score, even the critic score. Sure, the critic score isn't like 100 or 90, you know what I mean? But it's like, it's still fresh, it's still good. A lot of people are talking up this movie, and especially if like the audiences are really gravitating towards it, and especially next weekend since there's nothing out, I think this movie does have a chance to really, have a strong hold. Of course, we'll see how it goes, though. I'm not going to say anything definitive yet. Let's go over some worldwide numbers. It is opening at $282 million, so it's already $32 million over its $250 million initial production budget. Like I usually say, who knows how much money is pumped into these things, but considering it is a James Gunn movie, and when you watch, especially when you watch this movie in particular, it looks like all the money is on the screen. It looks like an expensive movie, so I'm willing to bet that this budget is fairly accurate, to say the least. I think it definitely will at least double that in the next couple of weekends. Hopefully, if it has the strong hold like I'm wishing that it does have, and, really hoping that it does have, it will be able to, do more than double that. Go out on a really big high note. As far as the other 2 Guardians movies, it still needs 488 million until it outgrosses Volume 1, 587 until it outgrosses Volume 2. So that's where it's at. Worldwide, however, for the MCU, it has already outgrossed the Incredible Hulk's entire worldwide run by 17 million, and it needs 97 until it catches up to Black Widow, which it definitely will do throughout the week. Domestically for the MCU, it's still 20 million behind the Incredible Hulk, so it still has a ways to go until it outgrosses anything else MCU, but it's definitely going to get up there for sure, especially with an opening like this. And if it, it'll with an opening like this, it'll be at least a little bit higher than what Quantumania did, because Quantumania opened with like 100 million, so this is 114. And if it does have the hold that I want it to have, then it will go even more higher than that. So that's where we're at. I don't really have much else to add because, like I always say, it's always more interesting to see what happens next week. And I know some people are already saying like, oh, it's the end of the MCU superhero fatigue. Like I'm predicting a big 50% over 60%. And it's like, I can't say anything definitive yet. We're not there yet. All I know is that people are loving this thing, and I especially loved it as well. It's easily if I can convince anyone out there who's on the fence for some reason, it's easily the best MCU film. It's easily the best Guardians movie, easily the best James Gunn movie. Just incredible stuff. You have to go see it. It's amazing. Let's move on to number 2, which is the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Breaking a little bit of records. Let's go over it. Making $18 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $518 million. Worldwide, it is racked up to $1,159 million. So that's a pretty big boost. It has outgrossed the entire worldwide run for Despicable Me 3, which is $123 million over that, and $2 million over the entire run for Minions, which makes it officially the highest grossing Illumination film worldwide and domestically of all time, which is pretty goddamn amazing. It's past this really big record, so now it's time to go on and observe where else it's going to surpass films in the all-time domestic and worldwide list. Now that we're kind of at a point where it's like, yeah, you've already outgrossed literally every other like kind of smaller kind of competition, so let's just go into the big list. Domestically, it has outgrossed the Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker's entire domestic run by $3 million, so it is at number 17, and it needs $15 million until it gets past Rogue One's number 16 on that list. Eventually, we might see this get into a top 10 all-time domestic runs. We're not there yet, but, you know, we might be seeing that happen, and that's pretty goddamn impressive. Worldwide, it is $2 million over Minions, like I said. That's literally conveniently the next one up in that list, so it is at number 24 on that list, and it's $56 million away from Iron Man 3's number 23, so it's going to enter the top 20 for sure. We'll see how close it gets to top 10. It's going to be very interesting to market at this point. I always get a little excited when I can talk about, like, you know, Top Gun or Avatar, you know, just to name a few, where they get like so high up in the, you know, highest runs ever, where I'm like, yeah, let's break down all of the films in history that have done this. And by history, it's mostly recent films, which, and especially IP, which can be a little depressing, but at the same time, it's like, it's exciting. It's a new blockbuster titan. How did this happen? You know, it's great. Let's move on. By the way, before anyone leaves a comment, I know how it happened with this movie. I know how it happens because it's Mario. Mario's one of the most popular things. I get it. You don't have to explain it to me. Let's move on to number 3, which is Evil Dead Rise, making $5 million, adding to a domestic total of $54 million. It has squeaked by the 2013 domestic run by a couple $100,000, so it is the highest grossing Evil Dead film domestically. Worldwide, it is sitting at $114 million. In just, if it gets $5 million more in the next couple days, it'll be exactly $100 million over its initial production budget of $19 million. $100 mil plus that. That's pretty goddamn good, and it has also outgrossed the 2013 remake by $15 million, so it is the highest grossing Evil Dead film domestically and worldwide. That is pretty goddamn impressive, to say the least, you know, that this film series can have so much gas going for it. I think they also released it at a pretty, you know, well marketable time, so, you know, hats off to them. I think I've already covered everything I ever want to talk about Evil Dead Rise in the last 2 box office talk videos, so I don't really have much else to add other than this is pretty goddamn impressive. You know, that's what else more can you say? You know, it just goes to show, like, if you were just to look at, like, oh, it made $54 million domestically, like, is that good? And then you look at the budget, like, oh, actually, yeah, it is, you know, because it doesn't cost $50 million to make, you know, this one didn't, you know, and that's pretty smart filmmaking, pretty smart business decision making on everyone's part. So I have nothing else to add. Congrats, Evil Dead. Let's move on to number 4, which is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which continues to be a little bit of a sad story, you know, making $3 million. It had like an exact 50% drop from last weekend. This adds to a domestic total of $12 million. It is $2 million behind the entire domestic run for The Edge of 17. This movie doesn't have a worldwide total, so it feels a little unfair to compare it to Edge of 17 since it technically doesn't have one, but, you know, for the director, that's got to be, you know, something that, you know, this movie is outgrossing your last one. I think for sure, though, that, you know, this movie actually being profitable and, you know, being seen by the widest amount of people possible would also be pretty special, but I am genuinely hoping, since it didn't have a, you know, great hold, and it's probably not going to, you know, have an immediate spike next weekend. I'm hoping that once this hits VOD over the years, we'll see the cult following happen, and then this movie will be, you know, talked about all over again, and that'll be really special. But obviously, it would have been even greater if it was, you know, immediately kind of this big thing. Oh well, let's move on to number 5, which is Love Again. This movie only cost $9 million, so at first you might be thinking like, oh, well, that's not that bad of a budget, you know? But then you see that it only made $2.4 million. There's no worldwide total to add on to that, so it's like, oh, that's actually not great, and this is a rom-com that, like I kind of alluded to before, I'm sure not too many people actually know that much about. So even though it costs, this is a really low budget, so hats off to them for not doing it like over bloated. But at the same time, it's like, man, if this movie maybe had a better market and maybe came out at a different time, like if this came out around Valentine's Day instead of like fucking Marlowe or whatever else came out, Ant-Man. Maybe then this movie, because, Valentine's Day romance, rom-com, maybe this movie would have done a little bit better, but it's coming out the same weekend as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, so womp womp. I have nothing else to add. I haven't seen the movie. Apologies. Let's move on to number 6, which is John Wick Chapter 4. Another movie that I'm probably not going to have too much to add with as far as commentary, but let's talk about it anyways. It made $2.3 million, adding to a domestic total of $180 million. At this point, if it gets to $200 million, that's a miracle. I don't think, with the low numbers it's getting now, it'll have that exact hold. But hey, the fact that it got that close enough is pretty damn good. The highest grossing film in the series worldwide, it is sitting at $406 million. So that is definitely a boost from last weekend, where it was at around 370 million, and I was like, I really hope it gets to 400 million. There you go, it's here, so that's really great. The pipe dream is obviously 94 million until it gets to $500 million. If this movie got $500 million, that would be fantastic, but the fact that it's made as much as it has, it has quadrupled its $100 million budget. This movie's all good, you know what I mean? Let's move on to number 7, which is Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, hitting a milestone of sorts, but not exactly the milestone I'm sure anyone really wants. It made $1.5 million, adding to a domestic total of $90 million, $10 million from getting to $100 million, but I don't think we're at a point where that's even possible. But worldwide, it was able to get just enough to get $202 million, so they crossed over $200 million worldwide. It's not 300, which is the doubling point of its $150 million budget, but hey, it crossed over to something that isn't just in the 100 millions, you know what I mean? So the fact that this movie still chugged along, and even though it wasn't enough to double the budget, I'm really hoping that this proves that we can see more of these characters, more of this world, more from John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein in this environment as well, because that's all I want, you know what I mean? This is a great movie. This is a great blockbuster that really needs to be celebrated and appreciated, and hopefully now that it's on VOD. I haven't heard anything as far as like, man, breaking streaming records or anything. Maybe once it's free on Paramount Plus, then it's going to be like the most watched premiere or something. I don't know. Maybe the sequel will be a Paramount Plus original at this point. That would be depressing as shit, but hey, if I can get more of Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley and this cast together, then I guess I'm all in. Let's move on to number 8, which is Air, making $1.3 million, adding to a domestic total of $50 million. That's $42 million behind The Town, and worldwide it is sitting at $84 million, which is $68 million behind The Town. I don't think I need another one that these movies have been out for so long that I don't really have much else to add other than, they've had some pretty impressive enough, impressive holds to chug them along, but still not enough to double any, official stamp number for their budget. But in the case of Air, I've already talked about how it's kind of irrelevant, you know what I mean? But, like I said, I just don't really have much to add. It's still here, that's pretty damn cool that people are still watching this movie. I know they already announced an Amazon Prime date for, I think next weekend or the weekend after. It's definitely this month. So obviously this movie will be out of the top 10 at that point. But hey, still pretty damn cool that it, made as much as it did for this kind of movie. Usually they come and go, or they're just streaming originals. So Amazon taking a chance on it and putting it in theaters, good on them. Number 9 is Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. God damn, it's still, I feel like last weekend it was here, or was it number 8? That's wild, Number 3, then number 9, and then still at number 9, unless last weekend was number 8. I already said that part. It doesn't matter. It made $1.2 million, adding to a domestic total of $14 million, so $13 million still behind Wrath of Man, and still nowhere close to doubling that $55 million budget, but hey, it's still here. And finally, like I said, I really don't have much else to add because I've already covered a lot of other details, and these movies aren't breaking any other records, so there's nothing else to really talk about. So let's close out the video with number 10, another one that I really don't have much else to add. Sisu, making $1.08 million, adding to a domestic total of $5.5 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at $7.8 million. Maybe if this movie was marketed a little bit more, just a tad bit more than what it was, we'd see it double. It's like $6 or $6.6 million budget, but hey, what can you say at this point? Anyway, I mean, the fact that last weekend it was out number 10 and now it's still at number 10, that's That's pretty impressive to say the least. You know, it has some kind of hold there. It's the year for impressive holds that don't really amount to great box office success, but they sure are holds. Now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. Number 1, I am once again going with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Big drop or not, it will still be number 1. Number 2, I think will still be the Super Mario Bros. Movie. And then number 3, I think will be Book Club, the next chapter, just because the first movie was like a moderate hit, and the fact that they're even making a sequel, I don't think it'll be big. You know, it's been, the first one came out in 2018. It's been 5 years since then. I don't think that many people are clamoring to go see that. I don't think the audience has grown, but I think it'll be enough to at least get into number 3, especially with the other low numbers. Number 4, I think will be Evil Dead Rise, and number 5, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. But what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.